Let's go! Welcome to the channel where things get exciting, fun, and a little unpredictable. I'm here to bring you content that keeps you entertained and coming back for more. Smash that subscribe button and join the ride. You don't want to miss this.
She didn't even flinch when she said it. That's the part that still gets me, even now. Not the lie itself. I'd started to suspect the lies weeks before that conversation. It was the way she said it. Calm. Almost bored. Like I was the one being unreasonable for asking why my wife needed a new set of lingerie for a 4-day accounting conference in Dallas. It's not for anyone, Nate. I just wanted to feel good about myself. Is that a crime? She called me Nate when she was annoyed with me. My name is Nathan, but I'd stopped correcting her years ago. That should have told me something. I'm 51 years old. I spent 22 years building a commercial HVAC business from nothing, a van, 2 guys I trusted, and enough stubborn to outlast every slow season. My wife Sandra, we'd been married 16 years, met at a mutual friend's barbecue in Naperville, Illinois, on a Saturday that smelled like cut grass and charcoal smoke. She laughed at something I said, and I thought, there it is. That easy. That's stupid. We had a good run. That's what I keep telling myself. Not to soften the blow, but because it's true. For a long time, it was genuinely good. But the conference thing nagged at me. Not because of the lingerie, though sure, that landed weird. It was everything around it. The conference had been mentioned exactly once, in passing, about 3 weeks before she was supposed to leave. No emails forwarded to me with hotel details like she usually did. No, can you handle the dog conversation until I brought it up first. And when I asked which hotel she'd be staying at, she said the Marriott, without looking up from her phone. Dallas has 11 Marriott-branded hotels. I didn't say anything, I just noted it. 2 days before her flight, I did something I'm not proud of. And I'd do it again without blinking. We share an Apple ID for purchases. It's a whole thing from years ago when we combined our accounts. I opened the Find My app while she was in the shower. Her phone was sitting on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I told myself I was just checking. Her upcoming calendar invite, synced through our shared family calendar that she'd apparently forgotten existed, said Scottsdale. Biltmore. Thurston. Not Dallas. Not a Marriott. Scottsdale, Arizona. The Arizona Biltmore. 4 nights. I stood in my kitchen in my socks and I felt the floor go soft under me. I didn't confront her. I want to be clear about that, because a lot of guys in my position would have walked into that bathroom and started the fire right then and there. I didn't. Something in my chest went very quiet and very cold, the way it does in the middle of January when a job site goes wrong and I have to think clearly or someone gets hurt. I set her phone back down exactly where it was. I went and let the dog out. I stood on the back porch for about 4 minutes. Then I called my attorney. Gerald Winslow has been my business attorney for 14 years. He's the kind of man who wears the same brand of shoes he wore in 1987 and answers the phone like he's already 3 steps ahead of whatever you're about to say. I'd never called him for anything personal before. I think he heard it in my voice before I finished the first sentence. Don't touch the finances, he said. Don't move anything, don't close anything, don't say a word to her. Come see me Thursday morning. She left for the airport Wednesday afternoon. I hugged her at the door. I told her to have a good trip. She said she'd call me when she landed. She did not call me when she landed. I went to see Gerald Thursday morning. He had a family law attorney there too, a woman named Beverly, sharp-looking, mid-40s, the kind of person who takes notes in the margins of her own notes. I laid out everything I knew. The calendar, the hotel, the lingerie comment, the way she'd been distant for the better part of 4 months, working late more often than made sense, protective of her phone, laughing at texts she'd turned face down when I walked into the room. Beverly looked at me and said, "Is there anyone specific you suspect?" I thought about it, really thought. There was a guy. Her company had brought on a new regional director about 6 months back. I'd met him once at the firm's holiday party in December. His name was Troy. Young. 40 maybe? The kind of guy who dresses like he's at a photo shoot for a catalog that sells watches and weekend houses. I'd shaken his hand and felt nothing particular about him because I had no reason to. He'd complimented my wife on a presentation she'd given. She'd laughed and touched his arm for just a second. I told Beverly about Troy. She gave me the name of a private investigator she worked with regularly. She said if I wanted to know what I was dealing with before deciding anything, this was how I'd find out. She was careful about how she said it, not pushy, not dramatic. Just matter of fact. If you want to know, here's how you know. I hired the pie that same afternoon. His name was Bud Strickland, which sounds like a character in a movie about the 70s, but the man was meticulous. Former insurance investigator, he said he'd have something for me within 48 hours. He called me Friday evening. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of the Home Depot near our house because I'd gone there for no reason at all, just to have somewhere to go. And I've been sitting there for 20 minutes without going in. Your wife is at the Biltmore, he said. Room 422. She checked in with a male companion. I have photographs. I sat with that for a moment. Is it who I think it is? Depends on who you think it is. Regional director, company called Meridian Asset Partners? Yeah. Then yes. I thanked him. I drove home. I fed the dog. I ate a bowl of cereal standing over the kitchen sink because I couldn't sit down, couldn't make myself do anything that felt normal. The house was very quiet. It smelled like her candles. Here's what I want you to understand. I was not devastated in the way I expected to be. There's a version of the story where a man falls apart, crying in the driveway, calling his brother at midnight, unable to function. I've heard that story, I understand it, but what I felt was something different. It was a strange, clarifying kind of grief. Like when you've been slightly sick for weeks and you finally get the diagnosis and part of you thinks, at least now I know what this is. I knew what this was. I went back to Gerald on Monday. Sandra was flying home that afternoon. Her flight landed at 4:15 at O'Hare. I'd checked. Beverly had a draft petition ready. Not filed yet. That was my call. But ready. I laid out what Bud had found. Beverly explained my position clearly. Our house was in both names, purchased jointly, significant equity. My business was mine. Established before the marriage, structured as an LLC with documentation going back to year one. In Illinois, marital misconduct doesn't directly affect property division the way it does in some states, but it wasn't irrelevant. More importantly, I had leverage going into any negotiation. Beverly's advice was direct. File before she knows you know. It changes the entire dynamic. I thought about it for about 2 minutes. Then I said, file. She landed at 4:15. She was home by 6. I was sitting in the living room when she came in. The dog went to her. He always did, no matter what, which I found briefly funny and then sad. She set her roller bag by the stairs and said she was exhausted and asked if I'd eaten. I have, I said. How was Dallas? She didn't blink. Exhausting. The sessions ran long, every day. Which hotel did you end up at? You said Marriott, but there's a bunch of them. The one near the convention center, downtown. I nodded. Let it sit there. She went upstairs to change. I heard the shower run. I didn't blow it up that night. I know that surprises some people when I tell this story. But I'd already done what needed to be done. The petition was filed. Beverly was handling the financial documentation. Bud had already sent me the full photo file in a password-protected folder I'd saved to a drive in my office at work. The clock was running. Everything that needed to be in motion was in motion. What was there to gain from a screaming match in my own kitchen? Over the next 2 weeks, she didn't notice anything. That surprised me too. I'd expected her to feel some shift in the atmosphere, to sense something. But she went about everything normally. Made coffee in the morning, complained about her commute. We watched television in the evenings like nothing had changed. I'd look at her sometimes and feel a strange double vision. The woman I'd been married to for 16 years, and the stranger who'd been in room 42012 of the Arizona Biltmore. It was the second week that things started to crack. She came home on a Tuesday looking rattled in a way she was trying to hide. Set her bag down harder than usual. Poured a glass of wine before she'd even taken her shoes off. Something happened? I asked. Work stuff, she said. HR thing, it's nothing. It wasn't nothing. I found out later, because Beverly had a contact who knew how these situations sometimes unfolded, that Troy had been placed on administrative leave. Meridian Asset Partners had received a complaint. The complaint had not come from our household. Apparently, Troy had a pattern and someone else had come forward first. The HR process had started rolling before I ever walked into Gerald's office. My wife's association with him at work had become, suddenly, very visible. The weekend in Scottsdale had apparently not been as discreet as they'd assumed. She was not placed on leave, she was not fired, but she was called into HR. And whatever happened in that room shook her. She came to me 3 nights later. I was in the garage, doing nothing useful, just standing around with a wrench in my hand the way men do when they need to be somewhere that isn't the main part of the house. She stood in the doorway. She'd been crying, not currently, but recently. Her eyes had that tight, tired look. "Nate," she said, "I need to talk to you." "Okay," she told me. Not all of it, not at first. There was a version she tried to tell me that had soft edges and a lot of, "it wasn't what it sounds like." But I just waited, and eventually the real version came out. 4 months. Scottsdale was the second trip. She said it was over, that she'd ended it, that she knew she'd broken something and she wanted to know if it could be repaired. I listened to all of it. I really did. I didn't interrupt, didn't get loud, didn't throw the wrench into the wall even though the thought occurred to me. When she finished, I said, "I filed for divorce 2 weeks ago." The sound she made, I don't have a word for it. It wasn't a cry exactly. It was the sound of something collapsing. "What?" "The petition was filed October 14th. You were served by mail to your office address. Beverly, my attorney, thought it was cleaner that way." She stared at me. "You knew." "I've known since the Friday you were in Scottsdale." She started to say something about wanting to try. About counseling. About 16 years and what they meant and how people make mistakes, and she knew she had no right to ask, but she was asking anyway. I let her finish. "I'm not doing that," I said. "Not angry. Just clear. I'm not interested in a marriage where I'm the last to know and the first to forgive. I spent 16 years building something with you. You used 4 months to burn it down. We're done." She cried. She asked if I really meant it. She said she'd sign whatever I needed her to sign if I would just consider talking to someone first. "You can sign whatever Beverly sends you," I said. "That's all I need from you." I want to be honest about what came next because this isn't a story where everything lands perfectly and I ride off into the sunset with no bruises. It was hard. The house had to be sold. We agreed on that without too much fighting, which surprised me. She hired an attorney, but the process was quieter than I'd braced for. I think she knew what I had. I think she understood that a contested divorce where Bud's photographs entered the picture was not a situation she wanted to be in. She moved into an apartment in Evanston in February. I stayed in the house through the sale, which closed in April. The dog stayed with me. That wasn't negotiated, it just happened. She didn't push on it. My business came through clean. Beverly had made sure of that from the first conversation. The LLC structure, the premarital documentation, everything that established it as separate property. That mattered more to me than almost anything else. 30 employees depend on that company. I wasn't going to let 16 years of someone else's bad choices take that from them. I moved into a rental in Downers Grove in May. Smaller than what I was used to. Quiet, in a way that took getting used to. The dog explored every room and then settled in the kitchen and looked at me like, "This is fine, let's move on." I'm telling this story because I've talked to enough men since this happened. Guys who found out and blew up. Guys who found out and fell apart. Guys who found out and did nothing and let it eat them alive for years. I did none of those things, and I'm not saying my way is the only way or even the right way. But there is a version of this where you stay in control, where you think before you speak, where you protect what you built and you walk out of the other side with your dignity and your business and your dog, and you feel, if not good, then at least solid. Gerald told me recently, we had lunch, we do that sometimes now. He said, "You know what's rare? A guy who can be furious and patient at the same time." I don't know if that's a compliment exactly, but I'll take it. Troy, as of the last I heard, was no longer with Viridian. He landed somewhere smaller in the suburbs doing something adjacent to what he used to do. I don't follow his career. I genuinely couldn't care less. She and I don't talk. There's nothing to say. The paperwork is done, the house is sold, the dog is fine. I turned 52 in June. I went out with a few guys from work. Bud actually came, which felt right, and I had a steak and a beer, and I sat there thinking, I don't owe anyone an explanation for any of this. I did what needed to be done. I'm still here. The dog is snoring next to me as I write this. Outside, it's October again, almost exactly a year later, and the leaves on the trees in Downers Grove are doing what leaves in Illinois do, burning yellow and orange and red before they let go. I find that I'm okay with letting go. I really am. There's a version of this I almost lived instead, the one where I confronted her in the kitchen the night I found the calendar invite, said everything I was feeling, and burned the whole thing down in one loud, ugly hour. I've thought about that version. It would have felt good for about 4 minutes. And then I would have handed her the advantage, tipped off Troy, and walked into a divorce proceeding with nothing but my anger and a screenshot nobody had verified yet. What saved me wasn't luck. It was the decision to be still when everything in me wanted to move. I think about integrity a lot these days. Not the word on a plate chime, but the actual thing. The thing that made me set her phone back down exactly where it was. The thing that kept me from lying to Gerald about what I suspected, or softening the story for Beverly to make myself look better. I told them the truth completely, even the parts that reflected poorly on me. The years I probably wasn't paying close enough attention. The holiday party where I shook Troy's hand and felt nothing. Honesty about your own situation is the only foundation you can actually build on. Everything else is theater. And then there's the matter of thinking clearly under pressure. Bud found what he found on a Friday evening while I was sitting in a Home Depot parking lot going nowhere. I could have called her. I could have called Troy. I could have done a dozen things that would have felt like action but weren't strategy. Instead, I sat there until my chest stopped hammering, and then I drove home and fed the dog and let the next move belong to Monday morning. There is an enormous difference between reacting and deciding. Most people in that parking lot would have reacted. I decided. That gap between the feeling and the response is where outcomes actually get determined. The third thing is harder to talk about because it sounds simple until you're living it. You have to keep going through the part where nothing is resolved yet. The 2 weeks I spent in that house, watching television with a woman I knew had lied to me, waiting for the legal process to do what it needed to do, that required something I don't have a clean word for. Steadiness, maybe. The willingness to carry weight without showing it, not because you're suppressing yourself, but because you understand that the moment isn't ready yet. Gerald called it being furious and patient at the same time. I think he was right. Most people can be one or the other. Holding both is the harder skill. Sandra made her choices. Troy made his. The consequences they're living with now aren't punishment. I arranged. They're just the natural weight of what they did, landing the way things eventually land. I didn't need to accelerate that. I just needed to not get crushed by it myself. The dog is fine. The business is fine. I am genuinely fine. That's not a small thing. That's everything.